See some of you. Are you all enjoying Wildpath so far? Good, good. Nice
Full of
one.
enthusiasm.
Yeah, I know. Come on, man. No, it's good. It's still early in the day, you know, so I've just got up. Hi, guys. I'm Thomas Panton. I'm the founder of Greenr.co.uk. I'm here with Ben and Faye. I'll give you a little introduction about me and why I'm here, so that you don't just think I'm some random guy who's been pulled on stage by Ben. And then I'll get them to introduce themselves. So my background is I worked with Greenpeace, the environmental organisation, for about 5 years. For the latter half of that time with them, I worked in the events team. So I was working at big festivals. I worked at Latitude, for example, as well, putting together the events team with the Greenpeace guys, campaigning, onboarding people. If you've been to Latitude, I've probably tried to get you involved with Greenpeace. I'm sorry, but also sign up if you haven't. Then I left Greenpeace because one of the things that really annoyed me was the amount of waste that is left at festivals. So predominantly consumer waste, definitely tents. About 250,000 tents go into landfill every single year in the UK. Only about 1% to 2% are collected by charities and scavengers. And festivals don't do a huge amount to try and challenge that. So I set up a company which would be contracted to collect those tents for repurpose, reuse, recycle. But we would be paid to do it by the festival. And we collected over 80–90% of the tents that we worked at the festivals for. That was great, but then a pandemic came. So no festivals, no events, no tents, no business. That was great. Failed startup, you know how it goes. But then I moved on to what I'm doing now, which is looking at the source of that problem, looking at product sourcing and where we buy our products and the quality and the ethics behind those companies, and then quantifying that into one marketplace for people to buy. But really, I'm here to talk about events again and coming back to my roots. I'm really excited to be brought back. I was here last year, which was great. Last year was really fun. Had some heated debates about what the events industry needs to do. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Ben, if you want to go first. I think we all know who Ben is there.
Okay, for anyone that doesn't know, so I'm the director of Wildpath Festival. It's something that started in 2019. It's a little collective group of friends that all love music. And love Norwich, of course. And I moved back to Norwich about 4 or 5 years ago. And yeah, wanted to have an impact on the creative community here, trying to bring what seemed like a very disparate music scene together. And Wildpass was the vehicle to do that. Right from the off, the whole team's really dedicated to making it a green event and as sustainable as possible for the whole team. And it's an interesting one because it's a city festival. There's only so much control you can have over certain elements. Sorry, my mic technique is terrible. I'll go back here. So, so we started looking
Classic drummer,
yeah. Take the mic away. So we started looking at things like single-use plastics, obviously seeing that, you know, things like drinks riders and stage waters. We thought we don't really want to be using bottled plastic bottles, so we worked with Life Water in the first year, which is a different brand of canned water, and also Norwich Refill, which are a great organisation. I think there's one in pretty much every city, and they made us some reusable drinks bottles with a list of venues and cafes that you can go and fill up at. Now, that sounds really stupid because you really can go to any venue and say, can you fill my water bottle up? But it feels a bit awkward for some people, I think. And if it's actually on a bottle and they've got a Norwich Refill sign on the window, it makes it more easier. And I think people are more likely to actually go and use a reusable bottle and fill up and have water and hydrate. Other things that we were thinking about was like the merchandise side. So last year in 2021, we worked with No Encore. It's run by an amazing person called Abigail, who was actually on the same talk. She's actually started Wildpath with us as well, so really nice connection there. And she went to a warehouse in Manchester and sourced maybe 600–700 t-shirts, vintage t-shirts, and we then printed onto the back of those t-shirts. I think I'm actually wearing one today. So no new product, and sorry, my mum's just come in, so I just had to say hey.
Hi, Mum.
Yeah. No new product there, and yeah, so limiting the impact that we're having in bringing our carbon footprint down. And yeah, we're just constantly evolving and seeing what else we can do. This year we're going to be working with Too Good To Go. So every food vendor, apart from one, is actually on the Too Good To Go app. And at the end of the day, they'll be handing out magic boxes with whatever's left, and you can get that at a reduced price. And then, little teaser, hopefully next year we're moving out to a field and doing a 3-day camping event. And we've already got a number of different initiatives in place there. And there's a lot more you can do with a Greenfield Festival. So yeah, there we go, that's it.
Thanks, Ben. That's great. Faye, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you everyone for being here. It's really nice to see all these people interested in hearing what we've got to say. So my name is Faye Milton. I'm a musician and I co-founded an organisation called Music Declares Emergency. And Music Declares Emergency's mission is to help the music industry communicate around climate issues and their solutions. So we do obviously catalyse and encourage the industry to take sustainability steps, but we believe that there's a huge part to play in communicating as well. Because there's just so much advocacy power within the music industry, whether that's artists or even venues, festivals. It's just such a huge platform collectively that can be used for good. So yeah, we started in 2019. It came out of all of the climate movements that were happening then, Fridays for Future and XR and all of the different things. And we have been working with the music industry, with festivals, with artists, sharing the No Music on a Dead Planet message, which you can see on my t-shirt here, all across the world. We've now got groups in, I'm not going to try and name the countries because I always forget, but definitely Canada, US, Chile, Germany, France, Netherlands, Austria,
You're doing
Portugal.
it. Yeah.
Doing it. So yeah, internationally. And yeah, we've worked with thousands of artists. We've got, I think, 7,000 music industry organizations, individuals and artists have signed our declaration. And the declaration's calling on governments to act immediately to reach net zero emissions by 2030, which is still possible. It's less possible now than it was when we started in 2019, but it is still definitely possible. And we're also asking the music industry to look at its own practices and take responsibility for them at the same time.
Cool, that's awesome. Nice one. That's great. Thanks very much. So we're obviously here to talk about the events industry and what we can do to make a greener music industry in general. And one of the things that you both sort of picked up on was the use of communication, engaging the community. For Ben, it's getting the city involved and getting the people involved. I mean, having access involved, those sorts of things. And for Faye, it's about sort of really galvanizing those groups, right? And getting them behind not just the movement to pressure individual industry, but like actually the wider decision makers as well at the government, right? And I'm really curious. So obviously you're coming at it from different angles, right? So one of you is at the event, putting it on, thinking about all the various different things that you've got to think about. And then the other one is sort of going in and putting the pressure on. Do you guys find a good relationship with the other one? Because I'm always curious, because I think sometimes pressure groups get a bad rep, and then events groups also get a bad rep for not listening to pressure groups. So how do you find the relationship?
I mean, I think because we're both drummers and drummers are awesome, it's really easy. We get on.
I'm not a drummer, I'm a guitarist, so
that's why we struggle, Tom. That's why we struggle. I'd say, well, we actually haven't worked well. We've been on a panel on top of a bus.
That's true.
That was the first time we probably came across each other. But I think maybe it's probably different for some events at certain scales where, you know, something like Live Nation's involved, or, you know, they're really Broadway Live, really big events where there is a lot of red tape or, like, you know, a hierarchy, and any sort of initiative needs to go up the chain of command to be cleared. For us, we're still, you know, very independent, very much a collaborative effort, and decisions. It's quite unilateral in terms of the management structure. I get told what to do all the time. So I think, you know, we haven't, as I said, we haven't worked all that much with Music Declares Emergency, but I don't think it would be difficult if, you know, Faye was to come to me with, like, we've got this new initiative, we want to. Actually, we were looking at running a show, I think like a sponsored night or something, or just to sort of advertise Music Declares Emergency and the hashtag,
which comes back to the whole point of raising awareness, communication, talking about it, having panels like this. Yeah. So it's not even necessarily having an initiative which you have to implement and think about the structure of that, but it's just having a conversation. Yeah. And I think that's where you're trying to push that movement, right, as well, Faye?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's massive collaboration between all sides of this it's basically what I found, there's this kind of small group of people really working in the crossover of music and climate, and you get to see them all the time. One of them is Brian Eno, so I get to hang out with him a lot, which is quite cool. But we all know each other. It's quite a small community, and everyone's trying to collaborate as much as possible because we all want the same things. So yeah, it's not a us versus them thing at all here.
Do you think there needs to be more external stakeholders in that? I'm curious because we were talking before about the fact that you were asked to get involved with I'll talk about this in a bit with you in a minute, but about a Web3 project, right? And you were like, well, I don't know anything about this when you first got, or little about it when you first got involved, but you suddenly got the hype and understood why it was going to be better and all of these things. And we talked about the fact that having an external thought process that hasn't been working in there with them from day one and like part of that network might be helpful. Like, and I bring this up because I spoke with a guy who was asked to design something for dealing with tracking spinal problems, but he wasn't a doctor, but he helped the doctors work out how to track it by just bringing a different thought process in. Do you think that people need to come in from outside the music industry, business people, government officials, who actually haven't worked in the events industry to help you guys move that forward, rather than just speaking to an echo chamber of people who, as you say, all know each other, all at the same events, all talking about the same thing?
You don't think so? I don't think so. Okay. No, I think there's amazing organisations, and they're so deep within the work. They've been working on these things for years and years and years. And what needs to not happen is repeating work that's already been done. Yep. And one example of that was, I hate to say it, but the Massive Attack report that they made a big noise about, the Tyndall Centre report. And the Tyndall Centre are brilliant. Massive Attack, what a band. But all of the information that came out of that report was already available. All of it was on our website for a start. Julie's Bicycle is an organisation who's been doing that work for 12, 15 years. Yeah, it's all already there. So it's sort of taking all those conversations back to the start when you start repeating work. And they're actually one of the groups who don't really collaborate with everyone else. So sure, it's great to have innovation and thought partners from different sectors, but I think, you know, the work is really granular and quite boring, some of it. So I think people who are really deep into it are the best people to be. And
as an event organizer, do you think it would be helpful to have?
I think maybe on a local authority scale. So we're signed to just recently the Greenr Circular Festivals Club. We can call it club.
Wow, but that's a long name.
Yeah, GDCF, another wonderful acronym. And that's backed by the Dutch government. So there's a lot of European festivals involved. ADE, Roskilde, We Love Green, some of the real forerunners in sort of sustainable events. And and the Dutch government are actually sit on that sort of panel, that group. And when we go and have the sessions, they're sort of saying, well, we can actually take what you're saying and implement it at local authority level. So I think maybe having more integration there would be amazing. I mean, it's great to be part of those sort of groups anyway, because I think what Europe is achieving, especially the events industry in Europe, is far beyond, you know. Big shout out to Chris at Shambhala, you know, and the guys at Boomtown, Chris Rudds as well, but everyone's called Chris. Because, you know, Chris, for example, has now got, I'm just going off a tangent a little bit here, but he's actually put there's mains power running through the Boomtowns, and, you know, generators, and the amount of sort of carbon output that they have is such a huge thing for events. Yeah. But we're learning about other practices now from Europe, and there's support in Europe at local government level as well. So I think in that area we could definitely do with more input, you know, more policy building in a collaborative way, and definitely more support. Yeah,
super interesting. You touched on something which I wanted to bring up anyway, so I'll come on to it, which was energy and the whole use of energy in events and just across the music industry in general, because it can be very, very intensive, and particularly at festivals, particularly when everything's on all night, 24/7 or however long. And I love the idea of that, bringing sort of mains. But one of the things we're seeing sort of in the energy tech world anyway is the development of microgrids, using renewable energy. So you can basically just plonk a grid into an area and it will run self-sufficiently without having to sort of use any extra energy from unrenewables. Is that something that so this isn't necessarily a government thing, but could be a private industry thing where you collaborate with energy companies that are, innovating in that space and then bringing that into events, particularly if you move into fields rather than being in the middle of a city.
I think, there's only so much we can do with them. That's why I'm so excited to be part of the GDCF, because we're looking to 2023 with that project really and thinking, okay, we've got I'm not going to disclose where the site is, but it's a very exciting new location, and it's a completely new location. It's never, no events have been run there
never
before.
Existed. They've created land. It's mental.
It's conceptual. To be able to have conversations with people that are innovators especially in the world of energy, looking at solar powered generators that can at least run your backstage. If they can't do the main stage, they can at least do the showers and bits like that, and batteries that are going to be able to hold on to that power. Or do you know what? One of the biggest things I think is just efficiency of use as well. You don't need to have everything running at 2 a.m. in the morning. You can just have a backup sort of system powering the festoon lights and whatever else you need. But yeah, it's something we're going to look at for Wildpass as well, because I think all the different venues are using certain power companies, and if we can have influence and say, look, move to good energy instead, because you're going to have much smaller impacts on the environment, then we will. But I'm excited about working with some innovators and doing something special at Wildfields.
Come on in. You've joined a great discussion.
Look at that.
Just so you know, we've got Thomas from Greenr, Ben from Wildpaths, Director of Wildpaths, and Faye from Music Declares Emergency. We're discussing how to make the music industry greener. It's a great point. And I think one of the things, again, it comes back to that collaborative piece. We need to see all players discussing and talking about how to improve, but also having a bit more openness to doing that. And I come back to festivals particularly because, with Greenpeace and then with Festovers before my current company, we were always told that the big players would never get on board with the change that needs to happen quick enough, right? Particularly when you talk about Live Nation, Festival Republic. And I know that you are working with, or did work this year with Festival Republic at Reading and Leeds. How was there, because Vicky's great, right? So Vicky's the sustainability director at Festival Republic. She's really on it and wants to sort of try and be involved. How did you find that work?
I think it's Festival Republic and Live Nation are doing some of the deepest and most impactful work around really changing things. Where you see a load of tents left in the field, they're tearing their hair out about that because they can't force people to take tents home, which is where the communications come in. That's why communicating about sustainability and climate issues is really important. But I think...
Go on. I was just going to say, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on this in the sense of trying to change consumer behaviour or individual behaviour to change what they do with their waste is not something which can change within 8 years. And I would argue, we saw Vision 2025 come out with the whole Take Your Tent Home campaign, and we saw some uptake on it. But let's be real, when you're 16, 17, and you've sort of just finished your GCSEs and you go to your first festival, you're not there to... You might care, you have the intent to care, but once you've drunk a bit, taken a bit of drugs, listened to your favourite artists, had some fun with your friends, you don't want to take your tent home. You don't. And I think that we as an industry need to be more receptive to listening to that pain point rather than trying to force them to change their perception of how they deal with it. So this is why I set up Festovers, was because it's not the solution, right, to just extend the life of single-use plastic. But it does mean that you're trying to not try and change 100,000 people from leaving shit at an event. You're trying to change the festival, who don't have to pay anything more to pay for a company to collect, upcycle, reuse, repurpose, and extend that life. So I'm just curious, why not take that approach rather than trying to change 100,000 people, change just the people in the organisation that have the power?
So we're actually trying to get governments to reach net zero by 2030. So we're not trying to get people to take their tents home. That's that will happen or it won't happen, and it's not really the biggest problem the world's facing at the moment. The issue we're facing is that governments are investing in fossil fuels when that's the worst investment you can make. Our economies are plunging into disaster. Everywhere's plunging into disaster, and this ridiculous addiction to fossil fuels. the cheapest energy is renewable, the least politically volatile energy is renewable, and the most future-proof investment is investing in renewables. And yet we've got a government who are, for whatever nefarious reasons, reintroducing fracking, opening up more North Sea oil. It's like...
It's abysmal.
It's insane, but there are other solutions. There is alternatives to the government that we've got at the moment. And the point really is using music, using that massive power that music have, is to just tip that balance in people's minds in what they're voting for, why they want to vote for it, and what they're expecting of their governments. At the moment, we don't expect anything of our government, just apart from a mess. And it doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. There are solutions that can get us where we need to get. And worrying about, 16-year-old kid who's been taking ketamine all weekend, taking a tent home, that is not the big issue.
No, I agree. But you can't, I 100% agree. You can't focus on the very niche, smaller issues as a singular point. Like, I work at the Tyndall Centre with some of the best climate scientists in the world, so I'm aware of this. But I do think that the problem is that what we're talking about is huge political, ideological change here, which is something the music industry has some power over, sure, but definitely not the ultimate power to change that.
I just think, imagine if loads of musicians got behind the Brexit argument. Imagine if that had just been tipped a tiny bit in a different direction. And it doesn't matter if you remain or leave or whatever, but that it's killed live music in Europe for British musicians. Yeah. It's caused incredible problems for the music industry. Imagine if they just got behind it and those few percentage points could have been shifted. It doesn't mean shifting everyone's
it's a great point
of view. Just imagine if that had happened, and then where would we be? For a start, the government would have had a lot more time to think about climate change, and they wouldn't have been fucking around with Brexit, basically. And
I completely
I think
agree,
if you see that power of what could have been, but then you also see the power of an artist like Kanye West coming out as a white supremacist, and what awful stuff that can cause, what pain and destruction that will cause in America where people believe in him. It's like, when you see it happening for bad, it's really obvious. Yeah. But when you see it, we're a little bit too cynical to believe it can happen for good. But it really has done many, many, many times in the past. So there's so much space for not only musicians. Musicians are in such a precarious place for being called out on social media, etc. But the brave ones who do speak out, I think, are brilliant. But also venues can act as spaces. You've got poster space all over the wall. Put up some posters about climate change issues and what to do about it. I love that idea of putting a thing on the wall saying you can bring your bottling, because who knows if you're allowed to bring it in or not. I mean, just being given permission to bring your own cup would mean that probably a bunch of people did, and loads of plastic would stop being wasted. So it's that communication that music's so good at, and I mean the whole music industry.
Nice.
That we're trying to harness.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I was just challenging you. Got to make it a bit fun, right? No, I absolutely agree. And I think you've come to a really good point on the power of artists and venues and events, and how we can utilize that power to change consumer behavior and eventually government behavior, because obviously they listen to the pressure, should listen to the pressure of individuals. You're both artists in your... That's where you've come from. Drummers, I know. Okay, all right. I get that. All right. Yeah, I'm not a drummer. It's okay. Do you think that artists have more power than we give them sort of, appreciation of? Like, I always think that an artist, if they post something, we talked about this with the 1975, and you guys partnered with the 1975, and the response of that was less than you were hoping for. It's a huge global pop band, right, or indie pop band, and I guess, like, how much power do you think there is as a musician, as an events organizer, as an entrepreneur? What do you think you have in that, and how do you think these people would respond if you stood here and told them to do something?
I think it's the way you deliver the message. Definitely, if I stood up now and said, guys, let's all like change to good energy and change our bank to Starling, which you all should do, by the way. Like, definitely, if you're with Barclays, HS, any of those, just Starling's way better. Triodos is the number one. So there's little things we can all do as individuals. You see that. I'm not sure what impact that had.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. I think it's very much about how that message is delivered, and I think that's why festivals and events are so good, and that's why the collaborations like this are so important. Is because Climate Live UK, the panel we had this morning with Francis and the rest of the guys, those guys are doing amazing work. They're a very young team. They're speaking to a group of young people who are going to experience the future that we're preparing for them, and they bring this big super vibrant bus to Reading, to Community Festival, to all these different big festivals that young people are going to be at, and they campaign and they have live music, and it's just fun, and it's very easy to absorb the messaging they're putting out there because it's a festival. You're a little lubricated. You're more and someone's putting glitter on your face. You're like, what's this all about then?
No, it's great, and it reminds me of two things. One is, as an artist, we always sort of when you're an early stage band, you always sort of complain that there are only 20 people in the room or whatever, but 20 people are listening. Yeah, those people will then go and talk about it. That will have a network effect. Mm-hmm. And similarly, it was Tessa Clark from Olio, actually, so not too good to go, sorry. But
that's something that was completely free, though, wasn't it? You just, anything that was left over, you went on the app, and I used that a couple of times.
So they're cool. And Tessa was basically saying it was a million actions which caused the crap we're in, and it will be a million actions which get us out of it, which is people, right? Like us all taking whatever step that is, listening to whoever we are listening to, and whatever artist, venue, or person we follow does that. The question is then, what if that person says something which is wrong, factually incorrect, scientifically incorrect, is problematic? Kanye West, for example, recently, Elon Musk every day. And I think, how you can't censor that. You can't censor people because then you're infringing on free speech. As much as I hate that is something that can be said, right? Those things, I get really frustrated with people who deny climate science every day on LinkedIn. It's like my thing, just like arguing with people.
I've seen some of those rants. They're great.
And calling people out, and then they're, whatever. So, Faye, what do you mentioned Kanye West. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the influence that has on a fan, someone who respects that person because of their music or whatever, and then they've come out and said something really bad, which just causes a huge road bump?
I'm really, really glad it's not my job to deal with Kanye West, so I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah, imagine being his manager.
But yeah, it's difficult for artists to speak out because of cancel culture, because of, it's more like hypocrite culture as well. It's like, oh, but you do this. We're all part of this big thing. You can't go to a gig without getting on some kind of transport unless you live right next to the venue that is using fossil fuels. So we're all part of it. If you've been to see an artist who's not from your local town, you're part of having them come and play in your town if they've flown from the other side of the world. So it's all like, you can argue until the cows come home about why artists are within their rights to talk about climate change, but still they will get shot down. So something that Music Declares Emergency is doing is an artist training program to help media train artists to be able to talk about climate change and these kind of issues without getting shot down. The first thing you do is talk from the heart and talk about your personal experience, because no one can argue with your personal experience. But it's about talking about positive solutions, things that you can do that are really impactful, but also just talking, I don't know, I'm not going to give the training now, but it's,
come on, get up and
one of the reasons
involved.
We're here is to help get past those issues, I think. And I think also we're starting a new thing, because it's more relevant maybe to the group who are here today, is we're starting a thing called Fan Club for Climate. So everyone can sign up to that. So it's basically, if you're a music fan who cares about the future, this is a place that you can find out loads of information about climate issues, what artists are saying about it. You can get free festival tickets by taking part in actions and events. And it's, basically building community around these issues and helping people connect with each other on a personal level.
How can they find it?
Fan Club for Climate. Go to musicdeclares.net and it's on the homepage. Click on it on the homepage. Right. It's Music Declares.
We'll check every single one of you have signed up. Cool. So we've got 5-10 minutes maybe max. I've got two things I want to do. Firstly, before I'm going to open it to you guys if you have any questions for Ben and Faye or me, but definitely speak to them because they're still working in the industry. But I just wanted to touch on one thing, which is we were talking about artists. We were talking about us all having an interconnected impact through that. we've seen some artists take pretty radical action to stop that. Coldplay just like stopped touring. You know, one of the biggest bands in the world.
In between touring cycles.
Hey?
In between their albums.
Interesting. So this is like greenwashing from
Great
PR,
press.
right? So this is the problem. So, you know, we see things like that. And I'm curious, do you think that sort of power can bring sort of more change? So like actual radical action which stops, like directly stops impact.
I honestly think Coldplay doing that and saying that they're not going to tour until it's sustainable was a brilliant thing to do. It was like throwing down the gauntlet. And then what needed to happen was like 1,000 other bands say the same thing. But there isn't that. That's the kind of movement we're trying to create with No Music on Dead Planet. So people feel like, okay, we're in this together. And then it's like a union, basically. Then you've got some action. But one band can't change everything by themselves. They still operate. It's not just the band. They'll have, 30, 50, 100 people whose incomes depend on them and their
that's
touring.
the point, right?
So
it has an impact socially rather than just environmentally, and all of these, and economically, these are all interconnected. And the music industry has such a pivotal part in the global economy anyway, right? Like tourism and travel and everything. So, if we're going to sort of stop touring, there's huge socio-economic impacts which that will then have. But I was just curious whether that could be something that we could move towards. Guys, I'd love you guys to get involved, ask some questions. These are both fantastic, well-versed, well-rounded individuals. They've been around the block, and they're still super young. So any questions? Would love to sort of get you involved, so go on.
Can we get the roaming mic over here? Is that okay?
I can shout, though.
Yeah, I could hear you.
Just sort of building off the back of what you were saying, I'm just interested in what your experiences or what your thoughts are on. Obviously, there's always going to be an economic cost, or my impression as someone outside the industry, there's always going to be an economic cost. Is that true, or are bigger companies and people who aren't doing stuff being
To what? To being greener?
being greener? Is it
No, it's a myth in my experience and opinion, and over the last sort of 12 years of working in the industry, from NGOs to startups to climate science and government pressure, it's becoming more and more affordable to make those changes. Renewable energy is cheaper than ever, and if we just invested into it, the technology would continue to improve, storage would improve, and then it would make the whole infrastructure better, for example. That's just one example. So I'm taking a pretty hard stance of just shift the investment into greener things, and it will just speed up the transition and make it more affordable for everyone.
I think on a macro scale, you're definitely right. I think actually looking a bit more, micro, and looking at something like wristbands. So we decided to use bamboo clasps and our PET wristbands, so recycled plastic wristbands. And it's not going to change the world, but for us, it was an important move, and it's the messaging behind that as well. We made it very clear that we were doing that because we cared, not because it was a little more expensive. I don't know if that's directly related to costs, or if it's just a bit of adding on some added value because it's greener, and making a little more profit out of that. So really things like on a macro scale, moving to a different energy provider, and that's just at the office, aka my house. Still a very small company. That was easy to do, and we've saved money on that. I've been looking at sort of the energy costs that we have off that, but there's definitely at a smaller level the upcycle merchandise sort of initiative that we ran was definitely more expensive and more of a risk, because we didn't know what sizes were going to come back, and actually there's some really, really great ones, really cool, and everyone jumped on it, but the margin of profit was tiny, and we actually lost a little money on that. But I think we're talking about micro scale here. There isn't, we're really, really driven to make those statements and do those things. So to lose a little bit is fine. And I think in the next 5 years, that won't even be a thing. And I think Tom's right. In fact, at every level, it will make almost more sense.
And with that investment, prices come down for smaller players, right?
Exactly.
And equally as well, consumers are more driven to buy ethically produced things now as well. So that's one thing. And then the other side of that, just on a really, really macro scale, is if there was a carbon tax, then actually it just would drastically shift the way that those price points work. But
I agree with all of that. It's for amazing festivals like World Paths, who are trying to do everything the right way, small festivals and shelling out more money, but still still making it work. If a small festival can do it, then the bigger companies can do it, bigger festivals, bigger events. And they'll, as you said, if they get involved, then suddenly the price of doing it drops down, it becomes a standard, and then you're good.
Cool. We've got maybe like 1 or 2 more questions, so hit us. Go for it. Don't be shy.
Just got really busy as well. Great.
Yeah, we don't bite. Ben does sometimes.
Matt's motioning. Yeah, come sit down if you want. You've got like all of
come
3
sit
minutes
down.
left.
If you've got any questions about sort of making the music industry greener, for those who've just joined, please fire. Just had a great debate on it, but yeah. Guys, got anything? No? Go for it.
There's some really good innovations in that area. I mean, I think the thing is with those projects is even if the impact of that sort of one particular project isn't huge in terms of reducing carbon, the messaging around that and then pitching to investors, larger companies, and making it a saleable product is really important. There's I can't remember what it's called now, solar-powered lorry stages where they just rock up and they drop out. It's like a shipping container. Drops down, and the whole of the stage is run on solar panels, and they're starting to scale that up. At the moment, it's still not big festival size, but every advance that we have in the life of batteries and the retaining time of batteries as well is pushing that forward. So those things are really important. And as a festival director, it's exciting to think, especially looking at the Greenfield event. What can we do? What can we, from zero, which is where we're starting, the messaging is super important, but also the infrastructure that we're putting in there, contractors that we're using, the water company, the power. There's so many things that we're going to approach entirely differently because we have that opportunity. And maybe we're not, I don't know, maybe Live Nation come knocking in 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, God, I could really do with some money right now. But I think we'll always hold on to that ethos and that narrative and want to be unique. That's why we're going out to a field, because we've done some city festival stuff and we want to keep reinventing who we are and what we're doing. And I think the sustainable, greener side of that will always be really important.
Yeah, 100%. And also the one thing that sort of stops that from scaling is storage, battery storage, like the ability of doing that, how we mine for batteries, all of those things. Those things are innovating and changing so rapidly, and it's so exciting in the tech scene, like watching new types of batteries come in, from sand batteries to all sorts of various things. And I think that will become more and more mainstream, definitely in time, but there's a big but. We need to see investment into it. And if it's not invested in, then you've got great people like your mate who are doing and innovating in this space, but not able to scale it because they're not fucking rich, right? So like, it's you've got to get the people with the money and the power to just get behind it. And that's what we do. We go out there and we talk to those people and try and get them to, come in and help us make some impact, right?
If there's any venture capitalists in the room
any
interested
investors come along.
in a small indie festival, we'll have a chat afterwards.
One more question. I'd love to get Faye to answer just one more thing. So. Go on, guys. I can see like the 4th row. There's a guy like turning, looking around his mates.
I'm happy to ask a question to Faye. If no one else.
Go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. So obviously you work with loads of different artists, and I was just really keen to know, like, who are you on an independent scale, on a major label scale? Who's doing the most? Who are doing the most exciting things? Hit us with some names and stuff.
Wow. Who are we working? Well, we work with artists from like all the way from like death metal to easy listening. It's insane. Artists who are doing a lot of stuff, like Aha, are about to do a lot of stuff. Take On Me, that song. Billie Eilish did a conference and turned the whole of the O2 arena vegan for her shows. We're planning something with You Me at 6. I know Enter Shikari have turned their whole stage show into the climate stripes, which is a visual that represents the heating of the planet, and they're doing a lot of work around their sustainability. Who else? God, I don't know. There are so many. I mean, orchestras are doing things. It's really across the board. And I think there's something that links musicians, and it links back to what the gentleman in the audience was saying just now, is that there's such a creative spirit in music. And people find solutions to things and find ways to party and ways to communicate, because that's what musicians do. They communicate and they party. Like, that's basically the main thing. So it's finding solutions like that. Presumably your friend with the van and the sound system wanted to put a party on somewhere where they couldn't plug in, so created that, which is great.
I bet it was great.
But it's that it's that creative spirit in music that the world needs. You know, it needs everyone who knows how to put on a party in a field to turn those skills into, you know, how to get past this bloody apocalypse that we're facing.
It's so good to hear you say that, because the two things which resonate between musicians and entrepreneurs is storytelling and having creative solutions to problems.
And
right?
being really unrealistic.
Yeah, and having a dream which no one believes.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it, guys. But look, thank you so much for coming down. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Faye. And please enjoy the rest of the festival. I'm sure Ben's got lots of stuff he wants to sort of encourage you to go to.
I mean, yeah, go to all of the music.